Between the thin veil of life and death, a goddess manifests, calling out the name of a recently departed soul, Suzuki Ryu. In his previous existence, he was a soldier of violence, a mercenary, an assassin, a weapon forged for conflict. Yet, his end came not through gunfire, but via an insidious illness that claimed him at the age of 42. The goddess explains his fate. He has died, and his soul is now destined for complete oblivion. Unless, of course, he's willing to undertake a little freelance work in her realm of magic and blades. The task is straightforward: eliminate 32 heroic figures. Suzuki immediately suspects she's an evil deity and protests the idea. She reacts with mock offense and then appeals to his final memories. She reminds him of the fantasy tales he cherished, lying on his deathbed. What if he could wield his skills in a world shaped by magic? The prospect is tempting enough to make him listen. She begins her story. 6 months earlier, a king from her world had unlawfully summoned 32 students from Earth, an act of forbidden magic reserved for the gods. She attempted to send them back, but her divine messenger was slain by these very heroes. The irony was too much for Suzuki to understand. Defenders turning against their saviors. The heroes, empowered beyond reason, went on a destructive rampage. Now, they threaten not only her realm but also Earth itself, as they seek to control the technology enabling world travel. The king responsible has sealed the gates, cutting off all contact, and divine laws prevent her from intervening directly. Suzuki, a potent and adaptable soul with no divine loyalties, is her ideal candidate for a critical mission. She offers him a vessel, a body she crafted for supreme physical and magical potential. Though she boasts of its formidable stats, Suzuki immediately rejects the flawless shell, fearing its conspicuousness. She explains that his soul will inevitably change its appearance, and he eventually admits that the body's perfection might indeed attract unwanted attention. With the matter settled, he inquires about his reward. She promises a new life in her world, once the heroes are dealt with. She mentions treasure, but Suzuki recognizes money isn't his true motivator. After a moment's contemplation, he agrees to take the job, requesting detailed intel on his targets. The goddess confirms all information will be uploaded into his new form, also indicating that 2 holy women will serve as contacts in the field. He asks for a code name to maintain anonymity, suggesting Ray, which confuses her until he clarifies that using his real name would immediately mark him as an outsider. She accepts his alias and prepares to send him off. Yet, before his departure, his soul is yanked into the vessel. Her farewell is abrupt and unkind, and he plunges through the void between worlds. He lands with a jarring thud in a forest, utterly exposed. His immediate concern is to find clothing at the nearest settlement. The promised information download floods his mind, a complete map of this new realm. Though grateful for the intel, he secretly questions how careless his employer might be. Soon, he discovers an unattended shop and quickly equips himself. Fully dressed, Suzuki, now called Ray, feels ready to begin his mission. He silently vows to repay the owner someday. As he reorients himself, he recalls his earliest days in this world, mastering its magic, which feels reminiscent of the Kai system from his past life. His first step is the local Adventurers Guild. To kill 32 targets requires resources, intelligence, and a base of operations. Becoming an adventurer seems the ideal cover. That very night, he plans to scout the guild, but his quiet walk is interrupted by troublemakers, 2 local thugs seeking entertainment. He notices that the goddess's language download functions perfectly. One thug attempts to intimidate him by placing a hand on his shoulder, but their smiles are sinister. They demand his money, mocking his indifference. Moving to corner him, they believe he's vulnerable. Ray remains unfazed, calmly stating he's glad to hear it. Without hesitation, he dispatches them swiftly, knocking them unconscious. He confiscates their weapons and collects their earnings, sighing at the chaos created by his new employer. The next day, Ray reaches his first destination, the Ramel branch of the Adventurers Guild. Entering the bustling hall, he quickly registers, earning a G-rank adventurer badge. To advance beyond this rank, He knows he must reach at least C rank. For now, he is confined to the quest board's modest tasks. He spends his time absorbing this world's history and lore, while also completing humble chores. Yet, his true training begins during moments of solitude, pushing his body and mind to adapt. In the forest shadows, he refines his combat skills, merging his old martial arts with newly learned magic. He swiftly masters mana control and the basics of elemental magic, preparing himself for the challenges ahead. Unlike the common folk, he perceives magic as a straightforward act of visualization and mastery. His scientific background grants him an advantage with the elements of fire and water, yet earth remains a far more intricate challenge. He concludes that luck is merely a tool to stabilize spells, a crutch he refuses to rely upon. However, his rapid training exacts a toll. Forcefully channeling excessive mana causes excruciating backlash. He recognizes that to truly succeed in combat, he must develop finer control. While anyone can cast reinforcement magic, only a true master wields it flawlessly. Suddenly, his progress is shattered by a thunderous crash. Instinctively, he turns toward the noise, his senses heightened. From the dense woods, a colossal creature emerges, dwarfed only by the surrounding trees. Quickly, he races to identify it. It's a dragon, already gathering to unleash a devastating assault. Still, without hesitation, his instincts take over. He pours every ounce of mana into strengthening his body, narrowly dodging the dragon's fiery breath. Panic grips him as he realizes his intelligence was flawed. The creature shows no interest in him, leaving no choice but to confront it. He readies a spell aimed at piercing its tough hide, centering his will on its success. With force, he unleashes a mighty lightning bolt from the sky. The backlash crashes over him, knocking him to his knees. Raised eyes scan the smoky landscape, searching for the beast amid the ruins. All that remains is a vast crater. The overload has drained his strength, and he contemplates his reckless haste. His spell nearly proved fatal. He admits to himself that he still has an arduous path ahead. Meanwhile, in the free city of Msara, a cloaked figure arrives at a specific inn, searching desperately for her sister. Her search is interrupted by a sudden scream, and her eyes widen in alarm. She bursts into the room, calling out a name, Arena. Inside, she finds a group of men standing over a fallen figure, confirming her worst fears. The men turn to face her, their expressions blank and unsettling. She demands to know who they are, sensing danger but receiving no answers. Hastily, she escapes into the forest, fleeing for her life, despite the formidable pursuit her enemies have summoned, a dragon. She erects a defensive barrier just in time, but the burst of magic shreds her gear, leaving her shaken as her reinforcement magic falters. The dragon rider advances, preparing to strike again. She is struck down, crashing onto the forest floor. Her pursuers descend, three figures she recognizes as heroes from her past, Sudo, Takahashi, and Hanju. Her eyes burn with hatred. She attempts to cast a spell, but her magic is entirely sealed. Her power is gone. Horror dawns as she realizes she is defenseless. Without hesitation, one of the heroes strikes her down. They mock her, warning her not to spoil her face. Helpless, she reaches for a fallen sword, but it shatters instantly against her opponent's skin. Her last hope extinguished in an instant, she lies battered and broken. Sudo nonchalantly complains about his torn uniform. Fear swells within her as he casually swats her aside. His friends comment on his formidable force, but one loses interest, deeming her too damaged to entertain. Yet Sudo's mercilessness is not over. He deactivates his defensive skills, and the third hero, Hanju, remains passive. Suddenly, Sudo is struck in the face, his own blood on his cheek. His eyes widen as his dragon crumples to the ground. The first strike to his defenses has finally succeeded. Takahashi gazes in disbelief as his companion falters. Within moments, two heroes and the dragon are overwhelmed. Takahashi is stunned, unable to process the chaos. A hand clamps around his throat from behind. A cloaked figure materializes, silencing the last hero. In an instant, Rei claims victory over his initial 3 foes. Noticing their lack of magical defenses, he notes their arrogance in never sensing his approach. Amateurs. With the threat eliminated, he moves on. Kneeling beside the fallen elf, he checks her vital signs. She's barely alive. His internal scans reveal devastating injuries beyond the realm of simple healing magic. Drawing on knowledge from his previous life, he begins devising a true regeneration spell, something the world's magic cannot provide. He remembers the nerve damage from his reckless use of magic, vowing not to repeat past mistakes. He decides that she will be his first test subject. But first, an interrogation. He splashes cold water in the elf's face to wake her. She sputters, returning to consciousness amid pain. Rei seizes her, demanding answers under threat of death. When she resists, he pins her hand, revealing her tendons are severed. Suddenly, Hanju, the 3rd hero, breaks free, screaming for help. Summoning a weapon called the Holy Lance, he hurls it directly at Rei and his captive. The blast knocks Rei back, and Hanju, confident in his attack, believes he's hit his mark. The dragon rider, now awake, nonchalantly comments that Hanju should have aimed better. Rei lifts himself from the dirt, noting his opponent's willingness to attack his own friend. A new figure enters, introducing himself as Kiru Hayato. Rei's gaze pierced through the lingering shadows as he asked if the elf was there to rescue her. Kiru, mocking his own subordinate, sneered at the failed protection of his prize, then spat out a vile threat, promising to turn the elf into a cautionary example. Rei's face shadowed with resolve. There was no room for mercy. Sensing the futility, Kiru realized his dragon tamer had already succumbed. He commanded his beast to ascend into the sky, but Rei, calm and unwavering, called out for him to land and face him directly. The hero scoffed and prepared another holy lance, aiming from above. The attack struck swiftly, yet Rei had seen this pattern before. He quickly identified the true threat, the airborne beast, typical of a boss and minion duo. With a single fireball aimed at the dragon's wing, he sought to ground the creature. Frustrated, the hero called upon a holy sword summon, filling the air with dust and spellwork. From the smoke emerged Rei clad in shining armor, wielding a sacred blade. He launched a firewall spell, attempting to trap Rei, but to his shock, the flames refused to obey. Rei walked straight through the inferno unscathed, leaving the hero rooted in disbelief. Then, a precise strike shattered the helmet covering his head. The enchanted metal cracked from the blow. Rei assumed a stance familiar from a past life and unleashed a rapid flurry of attacks, a deadly dance that overwhelmed the hero's defenses. His armor, already battered, shattered under the relentless storm of blows, leaving him defenseless. With the leader's threat eliminated, Rei turned his attention to his other captive. A mere flick of his finger roused the unconscious hero, signaling it was time for answers. The man awoke, racked with pain, while Rei explained that his limbs had been disabled. Calm but firm, he laid out the conditions: answer his questions or face worse consequences. He demanded to know if the hero was among the 32 summoned from another world and pressed for details about their abilities. The captive, trying to maintain bravado, refused to cooperate. In response, Rei resorted to a brutal method of persuasion, warning that resistance would only bring unbearable pain, which quickly shattered the hero's defiance. Tears streaming, he began listing the powers of his comrades. Rei probed further, asking if that was the full inventory. The hero's frantic count didn't tally to 32, and he claimed it was everything he knew. Recognizing their caution, Rei shifted tactics, questioning how they had arrived in this realm. The hero revealed that their entire class from high school had been summoned, only to be exploited as slave soldiers by the Oblivion King. But one gifted student, with an appraisal skill, uncovered the plot, overthrew the king, and seized control of the kingdom. His last question was about the pursuit of the elf woman. The hero, desperate for the ordeal to end, admitted they had bought her for cruel entertainment, but her resistance enraged them, leading to a savage chase through the woods. When her sister intervened, They decided to take her as a substitute. Rei, hearing enough, raised the dagger he'd confiscated earlier. The hero's face twisted with terror as the blade was swiftly driven through his neck, ending the interrogation and sealing his fate. Kiru, the fallen leader, now broken and trembling, begged for mercy. Rei's voice was cold as he asked if he had ever listened when his victims pleaded for their lives. Concluding there was no reason to spare such a man, Rei dismissed him. Later, the elf woman's consciousness faded back into awareness. She was overwhelmed with remorse, whispering apologies to her sister for failing her. Her eyes stirred softly as she opened them inside a simple tent. A masked figure appeared at the entrance, instructing her to stay calm and assuring her he meant no harm. He explained that her fractures had been mended, but she still faced severe injuries. She remained silent, unable to understand his words because the goddess's language pack hadn't included her native tongue. Recognizing this, Rei switched to her language, asking if she could understand now. Her eyes widened in shock upon realizing he spoke her language fluently. He advised her not to force words and that a nod would suffice to show comprehension. She gave a faint nod, and he told her to rest, promising to continue her treatment the following day. As he prepared to leave, she instinctively reached for a sword nearby, but her strength was too weak to even grasp the hilt. Her hand slipped, and she lost consciousness once more. The scene shifted to Rei's humble camp deep in the forest, where he returned to her side and explained that he would heal her mouth first so she could eat again. With her mouth repaired, she struggled to speak, her eyes fixed on her mysterious protector. She noted his gray eyes, unfamiliar in an elf, and realized he was not one of her kin. The question haunted her: how could a human understand her native language? She felt an overwhelming magical aura emanating from him, with countless spirits drawn to his presence. Something utterly impossible for an ordinary person. Rei simply urged her to eat before the food cooled, then backed away. She was left pondering his true nature, overwhelmed by the mystery surrounding him. As night fell, their small camp remained silent, the only sounds the quiet rustle of leaves. Later, Rei checked on her again. The food remained untouched, and her distrust was crystal clear. He sighed softly, then asked about her connection to the attackers. Sensing that her legs had healed, he subtly indicated she could leave if she didn't trust him. She finally spoke, offering her name, Lydiana. She clarified that her name was not the simple one she'd used before. Rei acknowledged her words but refused to share his own, going straight to the point, awaiting her story. Does she truly want his aid, or is she hesitating? Lydiana pauses, torn, before slowly extending her injured and bandaged arm. Rei observes her command silently, accepting her unspoken plea. He gently instructs her to remain still as he begins to unravel the crude dressing covering her wound. Kneeling beside her, he prepares for a delicate procedure, channeling a soft glow of mana through his hand. Lydiana watches in awe as her fate hangs in the balance. Time seems to stretch as the healing spell takes hold. Rei concentrates intensely, pouring his magic and focus into restoring her arm. With a slow exhale, he completes the first stage of treatment. Though drained by the effort, his energy was enough. The injury is healed completely and flawlessly. It took more time and effort than anticipated. The rest can wait. Inside the tent, Lydiana remains silent, food untouched by her side. Tentatively, she raises her arm, disbelief washing over her as she observes the absence of any trace of the fracture. This man is no ordinary healer. Outside, Reese sits beside the campfire, his mind drifting into memories. He recalls words from his master, a man who recognized his true nature at once. The master saw that Suzuki was not there merely to learn martial arts, but to master the deadly art of killing itself. Suzuki had been given one last chance to turn back, yet he had chosen to forge ahead. The dojo where he trained was steeped in forbidden knowledge, secrets of the ancient ninja arts. He was the sole Japanese pupil among killers from across the world, many of whom came close to deadly conflict, yet none fought to the death. His master often lamented that his school's legacy would vanish with him, unable to pass the brutal craft to his family, who refused to walk the murderous path. Even Suzuki's talented great-grandson would be spared such darkness. The master's constant challenge, the ultimate death match, loomed in his mind, a test he knew Suzuki could never win. His master would smile knowingly, recalling his student's own words. A haunting question asked repeatedly, "When will you be able to kill me?" Now, as Rei's face hardens with worry, the memory weighs heavily. He wonders whether the other heroes surpass the master he could never defeat. The following day, Lydiana carefully tests her now-healed legs. With her silent savior lost to her, she quietly slips away into the forest, seeking something. A small, luminous forest spirit appears, seemingly sensing her need for water. Gracefully, it guides her deeper into the woods until she reaches a secluded, tranquil stream. Sitting beside the clear water, she finally washes away the grime of her ordeal, her arm finally free of pain. Yet, the recollection of her suffering flashes in her mind, bringing her to tears. The weight of her experience feels overwhelming, and she fears that only magic meant for superficial injuries could ever repair her deep scars and shattered bones. She fears she will remain forever wounded. Then, a tiny spark of hope flickers, the memory of the healer who mended her arm so flawlessly. She realizes he saved her, and if she was mistaken in her mistrust, it was only her own doubts holding her back. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Rei trains vigorously, honing the techniques he needs to continue her healing. He tests his reinforcement magic on his own leg, pushing mastery to new heights. Sensing her return, he calmly acknowledges her presence. She stands before him, finally ready to trust, offering quiet gratitude for his help. Rei merely gestures, indicating that the treatment is not yet complete. She asks if he genuinely believes he can heal her face, to which he responds with a confident, "Probably." His reassurance is comforting. He tells her he has already mastered nerve regeneration on his own arm, and her face would be next once his mana recovers. In the meantime, he offers her a cup of tea, a silent gesture of truce. She accepts it softly. Under the full moon's light, their tentative alliance forms. The time for hesitation is over. The next phase begins. Raymond visualizes her cellular structures, focusing his mana to stimulate their self-healing processes. His unique approach to regeneration magic. Power flows through her, fading scars and bruises without a trace. Dawn arrives to find the healing complete, leaving him utterly spent. As he jolts awake, he berates himself for dozing off mid-task. Yet, she greets him plainly, asking if he is finally awake. For the first time, Rei sees her true face, surprising him with her undeniable beauty. Meanwhile, chaos reigns in the streets of the Oblivion Kingdom as monsters rampage freely. A lizard-like beast destroys everything in its path. A new figure emerges, demanding to know what is happening. With swift agility, she draws her blade and faces the creature. In a seamless motion, she strikes, ending the threat decisively. She exhales, the battle already over, but her expression shows unfulfilled longing for a greater challenge. Her desire is fulfilled sooner than expected, yet she is not alone. Another hero, Satayuko, arrives to assist. The swordswoman addresses her friend, Yuko, chiding her for acting rashly, but Yuko remains unfazed, winking confidently. The sword saint wishes she would show more concern, blaming the reckless monster's owner for the destruction. With her duty fulfilled, the two heroes depart, leaving a trail of quiet awe behind them. The panicked citizens could do nothing but watch as they were taken away. Meanwhile, inside the royal palace, the remaining heroes had gathered in tense assembly. Their new leader, Takashiroiki, stepped forward to deliver the latest troubling report. He announced that 4 of their classmates were now missing in action, the very same 4 Rei had recently forced into permanent retirement. A ripple of unease spread through the room upon hearing the name of those lost. Takashiro hesitated, visibly struggling to deliver the harsh news, suspecting that the 4 might already be dead. Yuko immediately challenged his reasoning, insisting he couldn't be sure of such a grim fate. Another hero, Hayashi, a skilled tamer, offered her perspective. She explained that for all of a beast's fury to go wild like that, it generally meant its master was no longer alive. Takashiro then questioned if there was any information about their whereabouts, but no clear answers emerged. Later, a smaller group debated the chilling possibility that the missing students had been eliminated. Takashiro turned to Ku, a boy known for his appraisal talent, who summoned a holy sword, a power he had not wielded before this moment. Ku explained that Kiru's unique hero abilities had unexpectedly become accessible to him. The implication was undeniably clear. Accessing the abilities of a fallen comrade required that they truly be dead. Nanahoshi, another student, doubted anyone local could have achieved this without detection, but he conceded that they could not afford to ignore these events. Takashiro then addressed an off-screen figure, ordering the deposed king to locate the vanished students. The former ruler, now helpless under their authority, could only sweat and obey. His expression hardened as Takashiro questioned the worth of defiance, mocking him and his people. He declared that those who proved useless were simply disposable. The king trembled as Takashiro pointed out the slave collar around his neck, a symbol of his complete subjugation. A casual hero suggested they could even turn the resistant into zombies, a reminder of their cruel practicality. The palace's servants weren't exempt from their ruthlessness. The king's fear was met with Takashiro's unwavering gaze, and finally, he broke down, offering a pathetic apology. The former rulers were dismissed as mere servants. One of the heroes sipped tea and commented on their foolishness, noting that the king's plan to manipulate them had been a critical mistake. They had anticipated that only a few students possessed appraisal skills, but now it was clear that one among them had that very talent. Takashiro then questioned Nanahoshi about their plans. The latter nodded confidently, affirming they were ready to act at a moment's notice. Their strategy was straightforward. Use the king as a puppet, taking responsibility while they reaped the rewards. From their vantage point on the palace balcony, they declared their conquest. The realm was now theirs. Yet Takashiro corrected himself. Their true ambition extended beyond a single kingdom. They intended to dominate the entire world. Meanwhile, with Rei and Lydiana, their journey continued, though Rei's expression conveyed clear annoyance at their companionship. A flashback revealed what had transpired hours earlier. Lydiana had asked him to remove his mask, assuring him she meant him no harm. Surprised, Rei reluctantly gave in, revealing his identity for the first time. He set aside his cup, signaling he was ready to speak openly. Lydiana expressed her gratitude, offering to do anything in exchange for his help. Rei dismissed her kind words, insisting her recovery was his primary concern. She insisted her feelings were sincere, but Rei cut her off, eager to learn why the heroes targeted her. She hesitated before sharing her story. She was an adventurer, and her sister had fallen into debt slavery, a system where individuals worked off impossible debts. Tracking her sister to an auction in Msara, Lydiana arrived just in time to hear screams. She intervened but found her sister had already been sold to the heroes. Her face grim, Lydiana recounted her failed attempt to cast a spell, her magic faltering in her rage. Rei already knew the rest from first-hand experience, and he apologized, admitting he had taken her revenge upon himself. She was stunned by his sacrifice. He had faced all 4 enemies alone, showing his strength was far beyond that of a simple healer. She warned him that such enemies wouldn't stop hunting him, recognizing him as someone exceptional. He agreed that fleeing was the right choice but then noticed a sword lying nearby. He picked it up, impressed by its quality. Typical blades would shatter under his reinforcement magic, but this one suggested better materials existed. Lydiana explained it was a dwarven blade from the kingdom of Mjid, located 2 months away. She pointed out a problem. Rei's current rank restricted him from leaving the country. However, Lydiana offered an alternative. Her own adventurer's document, a silver chain holding a B-rank tag. She assured him that traveling with her would allow them to go freely. With her help, he could meet a master dwarven blacksmith and gather resources. Her proposal was tempting but also strategic, promising him an advantage he desperately needed. Ray hesitated before making his decision, weighing the risks against the enormous benefit of forming an alliance. Ultimately, he chose to accept her offer, recognizing it as his best chance to advance his mission. He agreed to her generous proposal, and with that decision made, Lydiana clapped her hands with satisfaction. She then introduced herself formally, extending a hand across the table. He met her gaze, and after a moment of hesitation, offered his own name, Ray. They shook hands, solidifying their partnership. Later that day, they strolled through the bustling city streets. Ray appeared visibly uncomfortable, clearly questioning how he had ended up in this predicament. Lydiana explained that pretending to be a couple was a useful cover. Though a terrible one, it was still effective. To his surprise, she was speaking the common tongue all along. She admitted she avoided speaking it earlier because she had been wary and hurt, adding that a human speaking flawless Elvish would seem far more suspicious. He silently acknowledged her reasoning. Their journey resumed at a familiar waypoint, the Adventurers' Guild. The receptionist greeted Ray warmly, pleased by his safe return. When asked if Lydiana was with him, she lowered her hood, revealing her elven features. The entire guild hall seemed to hold its breath at her sight. Calmly, she presented her adventurer's badge. The receptionist's eyes widened as she confirmed it was a B-rank token. She then inquired if Lydiana was certain about her choice, and the elf simply nodded. A quick review of their rules showed that their party strength would be limited by Ray's F rank. He hesitated but asked if she was truly comfortable with the restriction, to which she smiled confidently. She believed he would ascend the ranks swiftly. Sighing, Ray realized that their newfound freedom to travel came with significant expectations. The receptionist handed over the official registration form, and his thoughts flashed to a single humiliating word: parasite. Other adventurers whispered about the mismatched pair, making it clear why they attracted unwanted attention. The first task was to name their team. The receptionist noted that any name would do, as long as it wasn't too long. Lydiana, excited, suggested a wildly romantic name, much to Ray's horror. Though the receptionist approved, Ray quickly vetoed it. Grabbing the quill, he decided to choose the name himself. Lydiana peered over his shoulder, curious about his choice. He settled on Ravenclaw, explaining it was inspired by a black bird from his homeland. Her eyes lit up with delight. She loved the name instantly. After registering their team officially, Lydiana outlined their next steps. But their departure did not go unnoticed by less reputable figures in the city. At the inn, she tried to book a double room, but Ray corrected sharply, 2 singles, please. Their next challenge appeared when they discovered that their assassin companion couldn't ride a horse. Lydiana agreed to teach him, but for now they would share a mount. After some shopping, she showed off her new adventuring gear. When Ray asked why she chose black, she replied it matched him. He then tried to return the clothes he had borrowed, but the shopkeeper nervously refused, prompting him to think his shopping had already made up for the loan. That night, as Lydiana slept, her rest was disturbed by a vivid nightmare. Recalling her past trauma, the hero's brutality, she woke abruptly in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. Shocked, she nearly screamed, and her panic caused her to tumble from the bed. Suddenly, a threatening face appeared at her window. Frozen with fear, she felt certain they were dead, overwhelmed by her terror. Her first instinct was to seek help from the only one who could protect her, Ray. Using wind magic, she unlocked his door and burst into his room, calling his name desperately. But the room was empty. Panic took over as she searched the balcony and called into the night sky. Collapsing on the floor, her hope seemed lost until suddenly, a familiar voice called her name. Her head snapped up in disbelief. Ray stood before her, asking what she was doing in his room, surprised she had gotten past the lock. She lunged forward, clutching his cloak like a lifeline, tears streaming down her face. Bewildered, Ray looked down, his expression softening as he realized the depth of her distress. Gently, he placed his hand on her head, offering rare comfort. "It's okay," he assured her. "You're safe now." He asked if she was all right with a tender tone. Exhausted from the ordeal, she had already fallen back asleep, unaware of his concern. Ray immediately recognized the signs: post-traumatic stress, a condition he knew well from his past life, affecting even the strongest soldiers. He understood she had been bottling her fears all along and covered her with his cloak, knowing her healing had only just begun. He wondered if this new body was making him soften more than usual. The following day, they finally left the city behind and rode together into the wilderness. Quietly, Lydiana thanked Ray for his support during the night. He assured her he would be there if she felt scared again, and she blushed, insisting it was just part of her recovery. They discussed their route, confirming their next major destination, the Dwarven Kingdom of MG, and officially embarked on their cross-country journey. As they set up camp, Lydiana noticed the wind spirits warning her of pursuers. Ray revealed he had been using detection magic since their departure, having already counted their enemies. 6 riders watching from a distance, waiting for the right moment to attack. Turning to her, he asked for her opinion. Her answer was clear: they would eliminate the threat. Ray offered to handle it alone, but she insisted on fighting alongside him. He looked at her, questioning whether she was prepared for another confrontation. She met his gaze with unwavering confidence, her stance firm and alert. She was prepared for what lay ahead. Without a word, they silently moved to intercept their followers, 2 of whom were busy tending to their horses, completely oblivious. From the shadows, Ray and Lydiana appeared, exchanging a quick signal indicating the number of enemies. Lydiana closed her eyes, calling upon the spirits of the wind. With a fierce gust, she unleashed a destructive wind cutter upon the first attacker. His companion watched in horror as the invisible blade struck, and he choked suddenly, lifeless before he hit the ground. Meanwhile, Ray swiftly advanced to deal with the second target. Under the silent watch of the stars, the remaining 4 pursuers regrouped, fear flickering in their eyes. One, visibly nervous, suggested they should retreat, but their leader scoffed at the idea of letting Lydiana escape. After all, her partner was just a frail-looking youth. What could possibly go wrong? An arrow shot through his throat ended that question instantly. The others stared in horror as their leader collapsed. The new commander, furious, stepped forward, spotting Lydiana and ordering his men to capture her alive. Ray had other plans. He summoned a torrent of water, the spell engulfing the enemies and leaving them helpless. Turning to Lydiana, he asked if they had eliminated all their pursuers. It turned out these men had been lurking nearby, watching them at the guild. She realized she had been their target all along. She apologized, admitting she'd been careless. She typically disguised herself as a human but had forgotten this time. Ray reassured her that it wasn't her fault as he conjured a wall of fire to burn away the remnants of the threat. They watched the flames die down, their danger finally dissipated. Lydiana was stunned, wondering how Ray could cast such powerful spells without uttering a word. He explained that understanding the principles behind magic made incantations unnecessary. She looked confused, so he asked her simply, "What is water?" Her answer was straightforward: "Water is water, no debate there." He pressed further, asking if she knew how water was formed. She proudly declared it was created by spirits. It was all fantasy, Ray thought, realizing his efforts to teach her science in a world of magic might be a lost cause. To demonstrate her knowledge, Lydiana swiftly cast a lightning spell of impressive strength. Ray admitted the display was mighty, but his scientific explanations only bewildered her more. She marveled at his mastery, noting he had learned a legendary spell in a single night, while she recognized his control over mana far surpassed her own, even after days of practice. A few days later, their journey brought them to a bustling port city. Lydiana explained that this was Msara, a major trading hub for legitimate and illicit goods alike. Her wink implied the need for disguises. Ray reached out to examine her false ears, causing her to blush. He quickly apologized, but she simply told him to warn her next time. She then shared that this city was where the heroes had been staying, and she had unfinished business. She wanted to visit her sister's final resting place. Ray looked at her with understanding, silently agreeing to accompany her. Their first stop was an inn they recognized, where the innkeeper greeted them warmly, inquiring about a room. Lydiana asked about her sister's belongings left behind in room 203. The innkeeper confirmed the bill was settled and handed her a small metal tag indicating her sister's adventure registration. He also placed a tiny box on the counter. Lydiana offered to pay for a room, but Ray considered it unwise. The innkeeper's eyes sharpened as he watched them closely. He offered a double room, which Lydiana quickly accepted, much to Ray's surprise. Later, he figured that keeping her close was safer than risking another panic attack. In their room, Lydiana was relieved to find her magic bag intact. Ray was unfamiliar with it, so she demonstrated, pulling out a full-sized sword from the tiny container. He was stunned. She explained it was a magic item capable of holding much more than its size suggested. Since it was linked to her, she knew her most precious belongings were safe inside. Ray peeked inside, fascinated by the pocket dimension. Lydiana boasted that the bag was rare and valuable. She was glad to have recovered it, then mentioned they had other business to attend to. Returning to the front desk, she placed a heavy pouch of coins on the counter and demanded to know what had happened to her sister's body. The innkeeper, nervously clutching the pouch, hesitated but finally admitted that her body had been taken by the royal knights. He explained they arrived suddenly, seized everything, and ordered him to keep quiet. Lydiana was stunned. Royal knights far from the capital? She understood now that the hero's influence extended far and deep, covering up her sister's disappearance. Ray processed the dangerous implications of this revelation. She realized that searching for her sister's remains now would be suicidal. Ray asked if she was certain about their plan to leave for MG. She smiled wistfully, suggesting her sister was at peace somewhere, though her eyes betrayed her sadness. Then she posed an unexpected question. Was Ray from another world? Her words caused him to nearly spit out his drink, exposing his attempt at stealth. She explained that her suspicions had been growing for some time since his manner was too refined for a local noble, yet he couldn't ride a horse properly. But the clearest sign was the spirits that constantly seemed drawn to him, revealing that something was different about him, something extraordinary. In a realm where opposing spirits, such as fire and water, rarely coalesce peacefully around a single individual, she marvels at his serenity. She reassures him that her origins matter little, yet she insists they cannot keep this secret for 2 months without consequence. Recognizing her truth, readmits that his cover has already unraveled. To obtain her trust, he must confide fully, and so he finally agrees to share his past. Lydiana listens keenly, ready to hear his story. Reveals his history as an assassin and his current mission, eliminating 32 heroes at a goddess's request. She questions if rescuing her was just part of his contract, but he clarifies it was a fortunate coincidence. His intervention would have occurred regardless if his targets had not been heroes. Her gratitude feels genuine, yet she doubts whether dwarven weapons can even touch them, especially after her enchanted sword shattered against their defenses. Explains that every foe has a weakness, and better weapons merely provide more options to exploit it. He laments the absence of a katana, a weapon that doesn't exist in their world. The mention of a katana instantly captures Lydiana's attention. Is stunned to learn she's seen one before, by a hero from 2 centuries ago, wielded with difficulty. Recalls reading about that same hero in guild archives. Could they have summoned a samurai from Edo period Japan? The idea feels surreal, like a crossover episode. Lydiana inquires whether katanas are common where comes from, but he dismisses the question. Instead, he describes that in his world, weapons are more explosive. Her eyes light up when he mentions gunpowder. She's witnessed explosions in the mud of their land. Smiles, his resolve solidifying. He must reach the dwarven kingdom. Looking out over the city, lays out his dilemma. Traveling with him would turn her into an enemy of the entire kingdom. She responds with a gentle smile, emphasizing her immortality as an elf and her disdain for kingdoms that shelter criminals like her sister's killers. Her reasoning convinces him, and he promises to assist her in return. Their alliance, forged across separate balconies, becomes unbreakable. Meanwhile, in the dragon's domain of Drazen, a messenger arrives with dire news. Over 10,000 undead are advancing, a relentless tide that has already devoured nearby villages. This army comprises their fallen comrades, reanimated as mindless puppets. The sheer number suggests there's no point in retreat. The dragon commander orders the gates sealed and wyvern riders deployed immediately. They unleash fire from above, but the undead hordes are overwhelming. Their mana supplies dwindle, prompting the commander to consider a new tactic. Yet, the enemies field archers of their own, and a wyvern is struck down by a volley of arrows. He orders his forces to scatter and ascend, but suddenly, a dark spear of energy crashes from below, threatening to turn the tide. Back in the Oblivion Kingdom, the heroes convene in a surprisingly casual meeting, one member hanging from the ceiling while another grumbles about doing all the work. The necromancer argues that commanding an undead army is demanding enough. The sword saint urges them to refocus on their purpose. The blonde hero smiles, reiterating the kingdom's crumbling state, corrupt and doomed to collapse without intervention. They plan to invade Drazen, whose salt lakes are essential resources, their only hope of survival. The necromancer seems to grasp the plan, though skepticism lingers in his leader's expression. At the siege's front, defenders of the dragonkin are forced back as the undead climb over the walls. The commander receives grim news. The left flank has fallen. Just then, a lone rider from the Oblivion Kingdom appears, ordering the attack to cease. He offers a stark choice: surrender or face destruction. In the same kingdom, the heroes gear up for their next move. A frightened servant reports someone approaching the gates, which swing open to reveal the dragonkin's king. He proposes a duel. If he wins, their kingdom is theirs. If he loses, the defenders must retreat. The heroes find his boldness amusing, the leader mocking the desperation behind it. The necromancer suggests letting the undead finish the battle, but Takashiro prefers a more amusing approach. He accepts the king's challenge, asking if the dragonkin leader is satisfied with the terms. The king agrees instantly, unbothered. Turning to the sword saint, Takashiro asks her to be their champion. She steps forward, ready for combat. The dragon king introduces himself, and she responds with her name, Shirishi Hibiki. They take their stances, both aware that the duel could decide a kingdom's fate. He signals her to draw her weapon. She looks at her empty hand. Her hesitation draws a warning from him to act wisely. Yet, faster than anyone expected, her hand moves, drawing her sword with blinding speed. Her attack is a blur, easily deflecting his initial strike, exposing his predictability. Her friend cheers as the king reels from shock, the outcome hanging in suspense. Takashiro's grin stretched across his face as he remembered his promise to let his companions act freely. The king's guards charged forward to shield their ruler, but the hero leader responded instantly, unleashing a blazing spear of fire. With a nonchalant gesture, Takashiro hinted at adding the guards to his necromancer's collection. His companion, less enthusiastic about overcooked minions, grumbled but quickly cast a spell to animate the fallen soldiers. A charred hand twitched and came back to life, causing the Dragon King to stare in silent horror. The necromancer then halted one of his newly controlled puppets with a simple gesture, forcing the king to witness his soldiers turn monsters. The arena was now a battlefield of undead, with decayed soldiers shambling forward as Takashiro proclaimed Drazen's conquest complete. The heroes observed the chaos calmly, their victory secured, while Takashiro's gaze shifted toward their next target, the Jiltred Republic. Soon, their journey led them into that very land. They reached the bustling city of Giltrud, and Ri was surprised by how easily they crossed the border. Lydiana explained it was due to her B-rank status. She then asked if he was glad to be traveling together, to which Ri replied honestly that he was grateful, catching her off guard. He couldn't help but notice how prosperous Giltrud appeared. Streets full of goods and merchants, quite different from Oblin, which was under strict trade sanctions. She wondered aloud what had tarnished her homeland's reputation so badly. That night, at an inn, they planned their route. Lydiana suggested heading straight for the capital, and Ree, disheartened, asked if they'd rent horses again. She winked and proposed a better way. Trains, massive steam-powered engines built by dwarves, with tracks running through Giltrud but not reaching Oblin, left behind and isolated. An announcement confirmed their destination. Manerbell, a city 3 days away. Inside their private carriage, Lydiana remarked how lucky they were to avoid waiting over a week, as the locomotive sped through the night. To pass the time, Ree pulled out a book purchased at the border, paying a full gold coin for it, a hefty sum for leisurely reading. He showed her the titles. One about flight magic, another on barriers, both written in ancient language. Grinning, he explained they were grimoires, and to her astonishment, he could read them. She joked that scholars would line up to hire him, perhaps even kill each other over the chance. Ree preferred to keep this ability secret. As he studied the texts to understand flight's principles, Lydiana admitted her unsuccessful attempts with wind magic, trying to harness an updraft. Ree closed the book and prepared to teach her about aerodynamics and gravity control. Her eyes lit up at the idea. With 3 days on the train, they had plenty of time to learn, but a sudden scream outside interrupted their plans. Days later, they arrived in Manerbell. Lydiana mentioned a 3-day wait before their next trip to MG, already having a room booked. Ree looked forward to more studying, much to her mild horror. They decided to test his new magic and maybe boost his adventurer rank. Their first stop was the local Adventurers Guild, blending into a crowd of experienced explorers. Soon, a quest board caught their attention, one about undead disturbances. An employee explained monster sightings had risen recently, but most adventurers hesitated to accept such jobs. Lydiana clarified that the rewards were low, skills too specific, and the risks high, sometimes even death at a scratch. The pungent odor of undead creatures added to their reluctance. Deciding to train, they moved to a quiet clearing for sparring. Ree prepared for combat, testing her form. Lydiana, natural and precise, responded well, though Ree offered quick corrections. Their blades clashed in a flurry, as he tried to teach her swordsmanship from his past life. Despite pushing her limits, she was a quick learner and finished with her blade at his throat, a triumphant smile on her face. She cheered her victory, rare for her to best a master assassin. Ree marveled at her rapid progress and proposed a trade. He would teach her magic if she taught him swordsmanship. Their training was cut short, however, when Ree sensed 2 figures nearby, likely more undead. Peeking through the trees confirmed his suspicion. Lydiana asked if he would handle it, but he hesitated. Conventional magic was ineffective against such foes. The zombies shambled past, oblivious to their presence. Ree stepped forward and cast a new spell, Purification. The undead dissolved into glowing motes of light, leaving behind a magic stone. Lydiana stared in awe, noting how rare holy magic was outside religious institutions. He picked up the stone, a token of victory and proof for the guild. She proposed they hunt more to elevate his rank, and he readily agreed. Suddenly, his detection magic erupted with chaos. He stared in disbelief at the thousands of contacts displayed before him. No, it wasn't just 100. It was over 1,000. A vast, writhing mass of undead surged over the hill, creating a mass of death far larger than he had anticipated. Lydiana quickly deduced this was more than a simple swarm. It was an entire army of the dead, an unstoppable tide cresting toward the city. This was no ordinary threat. It was a full-scale stampede, and the city's guards were only just sounding the alarm. The command center was thrown into disarray, desperately trying to understand how such a horde had appeared without warning. They realized that relying on adventurers was no longer an option. The gates were sealing, but their forces stood no chance against such overwhelming numbers. Desperate, they sent urgent calls for aid to every guild in the city, knowing failure would spell the complete destruction of their home. Meanwhile, amid this chaos, a luxurious carriage moved steadily through the upheaval. Inside, a disgruntled necromancer hero lamented the length of his journey, complaining about having endured a month-long trip. His companions offered apologies, having flown swiftly aboard a dragon to reach this point. The necromancer scoffed, irritated that their leader had more pressing matters. As they traveled, they observed Giltrude's magical-powered trains, which the necromancer explained ran on enchanted stones. His companions already dreamed of conquering this land to extend the railway network further, a familiar villain monologue. But the necromancer was simply eager for sleep. Playing the villain was exhausting work. Suddenly, a strange feeling prickled his senses. His connection to one of his puppets snapped, severed without warning. He gazed out the window in disbelief as his undead horde continued its relentless push forward. Yet, one after another, the corpses dissolved into pure light and vanished entirely. The sight stunned everyone inside the carriage. Amidst the chaos, a solitary figure appeared on the horizon, singularly purifying the undead army with ease. Enraged, the necromancer snarled, furious that someone was destroying his minions. Turning swiftly, he called upon the Bao Saint Yuko, asking for help. The saint winked and eagerly took the shot. She released an arrow with blinding speed, but re-dodged at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the bolt. The sword Saint Hibiki was taken aback by Yuko's swift attack, marveling at her agility. Ri, calm and calculating, carefully assessed the new threat. As the necromancer lamented his shrinking army, the two saints decided to intervene. Ri braced himself, realizing the situation had escalated beyond his expectations. The Bao Saint's relentless assault proved that magical defenses were futile against her. She was faster than anything he'd encountered. From their hiding spot among the trees, he and Lydiana watched a carriage in the distance, now surrounded by undead. Using detection magic, Ri identified 3 targets inside. His enhanced vision revealed they were the heroes in their school uniforms, sparking Lydiana's fury. She lunged forward, but Ri stopped her, warning her that attacking the heroes recklessly would mean death. Quickly assessing the situation, he identified the necromancer as Nanahoshi, the sword saint as Hibiki, and the Bao Saint as Yuko. 3 formidable foes, 3 names on his list to take down. Nanahoshi confirmed herself as the mastermind behind the undead surge, aiming to turn the entire city into her personal collection of puppets. A classic villain's obsession. Ri knew confronting all 3 at once was suicidal, especially with sword and Bao experts at their peak. His plan was to draw the sword and Bao Saint's attention while Lydiana attempted to eliminate Nanahoshi during the chaos. He reached for a mana potion, preparing himself mentally and physically for the impending fight. He remembered a flaw. If poison didn't affect him, medicine was useless, which could be his undoing. Stepping forward, he confronted the 3 enemies. The Bao Saint seemed surprised, commenting on his swordsmanship and good looks, noting they were roughly the same age. Both heroes prepared for combat, the first to strike volunteering, using a quick distraction with a tossed pebble, then lunging at Ri. His opponent's blade moved with lightning speed, forcing him into a frantic defense. The exchange was over almost instantly, her strike leaving him stunned by her rapid assault. She seemed impressed by his agility, while her friend simply watched, amused. Realizing he couldn't afford to dawdle, Ri poured more mana into his body, reinforcing his defenses to withstand their relentless attacks. Behind the carriage, Lydiana was readying her own move, while Yuko offered to assist her friend. But Ri knew he only needed to focus on one at a time. He skillfully blocked another strike. Her sword was of superior quality, far beyond his current skills. The sword saint taunted him, noticing he was only passingly trained but still holding his ground. He deflected another blow, sparks flying from their blades. Her gaze was piercing, her focus unbreakable. This was the true power of a sword saint. He also notices something else. Her technique is unpolished, sloppy, lacking finesse. It becomes clear to him that she has never faced the raw terror of a life-or-death battle, and this vulnerability is her weakest point. With a sudden stomp of his foot, he shifts his stance sharply, redirecting his energy. Recalling a secret technique from his past, he conjures an afterimage of himself, confusing his opponent. The sword saint is caught off guard. She must block instinctively as his movements suddenly transform into a flash of steel and speed. In that instant, his blade finds its target, and a single droplet of blood trails down her cheek. The Bao Saint shouts her friend's name in disbelief, witnessing the assault. Ray responds swiftly, summoning a stream of water, his signature water flow technique, and unleashes it upon his foes. Sherisher struggles against the sudden magical onslaught, but he immediately encases her in freezing ice, the sudden cold catching her off guard. Without delay, he switches tactics and engulfs her in a blast of fire, creating a rapid temperature shock. Enduring the searing heat, she clenches her teeth and calls his tactics reckless. But this is a true fight, not a mere sparring match. Suddenly, her body begins to fail her, dulled by the extreme temperature swings affecting her senses. Her eyes widen in growing horror as she realizes she is becoming numb and disoriented. Ri senses an opening and advances for a final, decisive strike, the Oboro technique, aimed at her back. His blade meets her, but the blow is shallow, and she stumbles, wounded yet not defeated. Her sword slips from her grasp, but she quickly channels her holy sword summon, preparing for one last stand. Ri's surprised gaze indicates that the fight is about to grow more complicated. The sword saint, furious, glares back with only a small cut on her cheek as a mark of her rage. She reassures him that her newly summoned blade can cut through anything, even magic. As she readies herself, Ray begins a chant, calling on spirits long dead to bolster his power. The re-engagement begins, blades clashing once more. Convinced her speed will deliver victory, she charges at him confidently. But Ri, drawing from his past experiences, counters with one last trick. He intercepts her charge head-on. In the furious exchange, his arm is suddenly severed, shocking her into silence. Such brutality was unexpected. Yet, Ray's expression remains unchanged. With his sword at her throat, the fight seems over. The Bao Saint declares victory, but then chaos erupts. Her severed arm jerks to grasp her leg, a gruesome surprise. It's revealed to be a puppet, an illusion, crafted by Ri's decoy. Meanwhile, his real arm, untouched, drops to his side. He curses his mistake, realizing he missed a crucial opportunity. As the Bao Saint prepares a lightning-infused arrow, she unleashes her deadly shot. The projectile hits home, forcing Ri to cough blood from the impact. The sword saint grits her teeth, recovering from her shock, while the Bao Saint fires again, summoning a spell that warps space itself. Her eyes widen in astonishment when her attack misses entirely, and she is thrown backward by the force of her own spell. The necromancer, exhausted of mana, curses under his breath as the battle winds down. Ri, fatigued and wounded, collapses onto the ground, knowing his misjudgment of their teamwork had nearly cost him everything. As his consciousness fades, he concentrates solely on stopping the bleeding from his side wound. Back aboard the carriage, the necromancer grumbles impatiently about the delays, distracted by his own worries. His complaints are abruptly cut off by a sudden spray of blood against the window. He looks down in shock as Lydiana's blade pierces through him, indicating she had anticipated his neglect. She declares her decision. Heroes must be eliminated to serve her own ends and secure Ray's safety. With lethal precision, she unleashes a lightning bolt, obliterating the necromancer in an instant. Lydiana calls out Ray's name as her part of the plan completes. Flashbacks reveal Ri's careful strategy. He intended to distract the fighters, giving her an opportunity to take out the necromancer once he was isolated. In the present, Ri draws their attention away, his eyes cold and filled with resolve. She moves silently through the remaining undead, closing the distance with deadly intent. The Bao Saint is still tending her injured friend when Lydiana strikes from behind, catching her by surprise. The wounded saint glares back, burning her image into her memory, Lydiana's fury unyielding. As Ray finally succumbs to his wounds, Lydiana desperately pulls out every healing potion she has, trembling as she administers them. She pleads with him to hold on, to survive, but the bleeding persists. Her disbelief grows as the potions prove utterly ineffective. A chilling realization dawns. Ray explains that his body's perfection makes him immune to medicine, an advantage in this moment of desperation. She quickly understands that her healing magic may still aid him, but only after she deals with the remaining undead. Summoning the spirits of wind, water, and lightning, she channels their raw power. Her volatile spell, Tempest, erupts in a storm of energy that tears through the undead army, leaving nothing behind. From the city walls, the guild master watches in awe as her devastating magic clears the battlefield. In the aftermath of chaos, the city's defenders are stunned by recent events. A mysterious stranger emerged from nowhere, rendering a monstrous horde useless with remarkable ease, then engaged in a tense battle with a legendary swordswoman to a standstill. The priests of the city, overwhelmed by the stranger's deeds, now call him a savior. Just as concern reaches its peak, a guard bursts in with urgent news. The guildmaster swiftly orders the city gates opened, and as they swing wide, Lydiana swiftly carries Ray to a place of safety. The guild leader and his guards stand transfixed, staring in disbelief. He then steps forward, introducing himself as Mulligan. Lydiana, demanding aid for her wounded companion, identifies herself and insists on dispatching a healer. Ray is taken into a nearby church, his life hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, in the Oblivion Kingdom, the Sword Saint Sherishir remains shaken by her defeat. She and the Bow Saint retreat hurriedly to the palace's safety. Her mind is haunted by the image of his blade, a constant source of frustration and fury. Peering into a nearby chamber, her face reflects concern, knowing her own healing skills are insufficient for her injuries. With their mission a failure, they prepare to depart. The Bow Saint carefully helps her onto their dragon, and the two heroes take to the skies, fleeing into the clouds. Meanwhile, Takashiro, their leader, learns of the man who injured his best fighter. Shirishi's eyes burn with hatred, vowing never to forgive him. A week later, the battered city of Manorabel begins to show signs of recovery. At the central government building, the council demands a comprehensive report. Mulligan, the guildmaster, steps forward to deliver an update. He explains that while adventurers continue to clear remaining undead, the source of the assault and the whereabouts of the two female heroes remain unknown. The body of the necromancer left behind remains a mystery, with connections to the fallen Drazen kingdom suggested but unconfirmed. The council members, however, seem more focused on the two individuals who saved their city. Mulligan reports that Ray was rescued by church healers and is currently resting, but they want to know more. The leader interrupts fiercely, demanding their identities. Mulligan criticizes their vague report and orders an interrogation of the elf, a B-rank mage. The council's true intentions emerge, questioning why they should defend adventurers who fought a horde sent to destroy the city. Mulligan responds that, while they are valuable, they are also dangerously powerful. He recalls Lana's destructive force, which could easily have turned against the city. The leader finally grasps the gravity of the situation and instructs Mulligan to treat them as heroes and keep him informed. Mulligan then departs to meet the city's saviors. In Ray's recovery chamber, Lydiana tends to him as she playfully ignores his protests about feeding himself. He warns she should put on some clothes, but she leans in, citing her concern that he's not fully healed. At that moment, Mulligan enters, trying to ignore the situation's awkwardness. His gaze falls on them as Lydiana scowls and Ray wishes he could disappear. Mulligan apologizes for the interruption and introduces himself as the guild master of Manorabel. Ray finds it unusual for a guild leader to be so courteous, but Lydiana guesses he's here to deliver an S-rank certification, something Ray fails to understand. Mulligan confirms their promotion to the highest rank, explaining it grants them complete independence from nations and guilds. They would be exempt from taxes, able to travel freely, and even ignore laws, though the guild prefers they not. He also informs them that they will receive distinguished titles: Lydiana the Thunder Empress and Ray the Holy Emperor. Neither seems thrilled about their new, overly dramatic epithets. After delivering the news, Mulligan prepares to leave, but not before overhearing Ray suggest they continue her treatment. He recalls how Lydiana healed his severed arm using her magic bag, preventing decay and enabling reattachment. Mulligan, haunted by the sight of the regenerating limb, cannot believe what he saw. Back at the guild, his assistant arrives with stomach medicine but finds him overwhelmed, muttering about the impossible miracle. She questions his stability, and he quickly takes the medicine, confessing he's far from okay. His mind races with thoughts of the two new S-rank adventurers. He describes Ray's incredible power, a one-man army capable of purifying thousands, and Lydiana's destructive spell that can wipe out entire hordes. To Mulligan, they are walking disasters wrapped in beauty. His assistant notes that headquarters takes their status very seriously. In fact, they are sending a special appraiser to verify their capabilities. To his astonishment, she appears to be that very appraiser herself. Later, at the guild hall, Ray and Lydiana meet the official inspector from head office. She introduces herself as Eve, but Mulligan quickly realizes she did not come alone. Two large, intimidating bodyguards accompany her, hinting at the importance and danger of the visitors. In the dimly lit chamber, two figures stood sharply contrasted. One was a knight clad in gleaming armor, the other a seasoned mage, their presence commanding. Mulligan, watching intently, wondered what grand plans the guild headquarters truly had. The knight, identified as Sven, leader of an elite A-rank party, wore a haughty expression, while beside him stood Roy, a lone A-rank adventurer with quiet confidence. These were formidable warriors, undeniably powerful. Sven spoke with a patronizing tone, telling Eve to mind her manners and mocking the notion of her being an S-rank. He offered to handle the boy himself, but Roy countered calmly, reminding them that Eve was also an S-rank. Without hesitation, Ray waved dismissively, urging them to settle their differences and leave the matter aside. Sven's face twisted in frustration, anger flickering in his eyes, shocked by the audacity of the young girl. Yet, behind her eye patch, Eve noticed something that shifted her perception entirely. Ray's eyes widened in surprise, a reaction shared by Sven, who was confused by the sudden change. It was then that the appraiser from headquarters, bowing deeply, apologized profusely for her earlier rudeness. Her words were humble, almost reverent, leaving Ray expressionless as he processed this extraordinary development. Sven seized Mulligan, demanding an explanation for his subordinate's strange behavior. Before anyone could react further, a sudden movement and a piercing sound interrupted the scene. The A-rank knight was knocked off his feet, sprawled across the floor. It was clear he had discovered the reason for the upheaval. Ray knelt beside Eve, who was still bowing in remorse, and softly asked what she had done. She could only beg for forgiveness, overwhelmed by her own actions. Mulligan, observing all this, realized he had just witnessed a strike of divine fury, a literal lightning bolt made flesh. Ray instructed him to gather his bodyguards and depart. He needed privacy with the appraiser. Without hesitation, Mulligan complied, but Lydiana drew her blade, reminding the mage that he, too, was on her list. The guards swiftly escorted their fallen leader out of the room, leaving only the three remaining figures. With the silence pressing down, Ray turned to Eve, eager to understand what she had seen. She hesitated, her voice trembling, and explained that the eye on her right, her magic eye of appraisal, could discern a person's true nature, from their race to hidden abilities. She confessed she had been ordered to use it on him without permission, and she was sorry for the breach of protocol. Lydiana questioned whether revealing such guild secrets was wise, but Eve pressed on, sharing her results. The scan showed that Ray was an angel. All other data remained unknown, but the core result was unmistakable. She reiterated, "Angel." The revelation stunned Lydiana into silence. Eve revealed her faith in the goddess Arya and now believed Ray was a divine messenger, committed to following his will. Ray looked at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity, deciding to offer a cautious response. Meanwhile, the mage bodyguard confirmed that he and his partner had been assigned as escorts, and Ray inquired if he should handle their rude behavior. Eve quickly refused, wishing to keep the matter in hand. She then produced their official S-rank adventure tags, crafted from rare and powerful adamantite. Their size and quality suited them perfectly, and Eve commented on how fitting they were for the duo. Her words caused Lydiana to blush furiously and tease the mage. Ray noted they needed to register their mana to formalize their status, so he called for the guild master to return. Mulligan soon burst into the room, carrying the essential registration device. Ray placed his new tag onto a crystal orb, infusing it with his mana, and the assistant confirmed the successful registration. He explained that their records would now be secured, accessible only to top officials, and issued them rank tags for daily use to prevent unwanted attention. Eve then asked what should be included in her official report to headquarters. Ray turned the question back on Mulligan, who summarized Ray's abilities. Chantless magic across multiple elements, master-level swordsmanship, and impossible regeneration magic. Mulligan emphasized that Ray's power was extraordinary, almost unthinkable. Ray advised Eve to simply report that, and she agreed. Mulligan pressed that Ray's abilities defied normal understanding, emphasizing how unusual they truly were. After concluding her tasks, Eve excused herself to the communication room, explaining that the device was an artifact from a hero of bygone ages. Ray was eager to explore it, and Eve confirmed that, as an S-rank, he was free to use it anytime. Mulligan recognized that dispatching an appraiser was an exceptional move, suggesting someone else might be orchestrating events beyond the guild's leadership. Ray understood that the Adventurers Guild was far from a unified front. Soon, Eve rejoined, announcing her report was finished. Her unexpected return surprised everyone. She then declared her resignation from the guild, vowing to dedicate herself to serving Ray and Lydiana, a shocking decision that left her companions momentarily speechless. Later, the three made their way through the city streets, a new and surprising member now part of their group. Ray told her she was free to go, but Eve insisted on staying by their side. As they walked, Ray observed her movements, sensing that she was more than an ordinary guild staffer. Deciding it was time for a discussion, he suggested they pause for tea. Over their drinks, Lydiana learned that Eve was 18 and possessed some bloodline of beastkin heritage. She then inquired about her parents, a seemingly innocent question. Eve explained she had been abandoned at a church orphanage and raised there. Lydiana leaned closer, softly whispering an observation to Ray. Suddenly, Eve looked up, asking whether Ray was an assassin or an inquisitor. Ray questioned her concern, and Lydiana pointed out that her presence was accompanied by dark spirits, indicating she practiced dark magic, an unusual skill for someone raised in a holy church environment. Lydiana suspected Eve might be either a church servant or an inquisitor dispatched by the guild. Eve, with a quiet resolve, denied ever being an assassin. Her panic was palpable as she insisted her sole purpose was to serve Ray as a messenger of the goddess. Lydiana, however, challenged her, pointing out that if her claim was true, she would have reported directly to the church, not the guild. Eve's face flickered with hesitation before she admitted that her past was far more complicated. She revealed that she had been abandoned by the church that raised her, due to her unique magic eye. From a young age, she had been trained to become an inquisitor, but 6 months prior, she lost her eye and her fighting skills, leading to her exile. Ray stared in shock. He asked her to clarify what she meant by losing her eye. Eve explained that her right eye was used for evaluation, while her left was a magical flame eye. Lydiana was amazed, having never encountered anyone with 2 different magical eyes. After losing her main combat ability, the church considered her useless, and a guild official took her in, which she saw as fortunate. Yet, Lydiana persisted, questioning why she would follow Ray if the church had cast her aside. Eve responded that her faith in the goddess remained separate from the corrupt institution. To her, Ray's arrival seemed like a divine sign, a response to her prayers. She recounted that the holy messenger, killed by heroes, had been sent with a divine oracle. Eve was tasked with finding her, but during her mission, she was attacked and lost her eye. Ray asked whether the heroes knew what the oracle contained. Eve shook her head. The holy woman had been distrustful of the kingdom and concealed the true message. She drew a small, unassuming book and opened it to reveal illuminated, hidden script, confirmation that it indeed contained the divine oracle. Fleeing to protect the message, Eve had only her superior's knowledge of its existence. Rei realized that if the heroes had known about him or the oracle, they wouldn't have been so careless. His expression darkened as the pieces fell into place. Eve believed that her meeting with Rei was the goddess's will, a fated yet meaningful encounter. Lydiana and Rei exchanged glances, digesting this flood of revelations. Rei's final question was about her opinion of the heroes. Her face hardened as she declared they must pay for their actions. Recalling the brutal scene when she found the holy woman's body, her desire for vengeance intensified. She knelt, offering her dark magic and swordsmanship skills to their cause. Lydiana suggested they should probably take her along, and Rei, aware of her valuable intelligence, agreed. He remembered the goddess mentioning 2 holy women who could be his allies, and he resolved not to send her away just yet. Eve bowed deeply in gratitude. Lydiana teased Rei about his soft side, but he insisted she needed to demonstrate her true strength. Later at the inn, Eve prepared herself to face the ritual. Rei commanded her to lie down, removing her tie quietly, and apologized, admitting she was inexperienced but determined. His explanation was abrupt, and Lydiana pointed out that his reasoning was lacking. He clarified that he intended to restore her missing eye, warning that though regeneration was possible, the magic might not return. Still, he considered it better than nothing, and she nodded. He briefly touched her eye with a glowing palm, and instantly, the treatment was complete. She gazed out the window, tears of joy streaming down her face as she touched her cheek. Her gratitude was expressed in an acrobatic bow, a testament to her flexibility. Rei reassured her that they would test her eye's functionality later. Just then, Lydiana arrived with tea and Rei, exhausted, asked her to look after Eve while he took some rest. Their new companion accepted, and the 2 women shared a quiet moment over tea, forging a budding bond. Meanwhile, Rei remained unconscious from the effort. Elsewhere, at the Adventurers Guild, Mulligan informed Sven and another bodyguard that their pay was being halved. Furious, Sven slammed his fist on the desk, demanding details about Rei's group, but Mulligan remained calm, citing strict confidentiality. Sven scoffed at the idea that they posed any threat. Mulligan's gaze hardened. He questioned whether Sven truly had what it took to be rank adventurers, and in frustration they stormed out. Noticing their anger, Sven swore he wouldn't accept this humiliation without a fight. Later, outside the city, Rei explained that they would conduct a field test to evaluate Eve's skills. They found a suitable clearing, and Rei decided to put her newly restored fire magic to the test. He told her not to hold back, assuring him and Lydiana could handle any stray flames. Confident, Eve closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her left eye burned with a fierce glow. A torrent of black flame erupted from the ground, startling both Rei and Lydiana. The destructive power was overwhelming. Lydiana stared in awe, asking if Eve only intended to burn her target, which Eve confirmed. Eve explained her flame eye had its limits, including high mana consumption and a brief usage window. Rei quickly deduced that her magical talents made her a natural assassin, though her appraisal eye had a flaw. It required 10 seconds of direct eye contact, making stealth difficult. He warned her that gazing at someone that long would be obvious. He promised to teach her fire magic's fundamentals to improve her control. When asked about her dark magic, she revealed she only knew 2 spells: sleep and paralysis. Rei's interest piqued immediately. He asked her to try casting one of these spells on him, much to her surprise. Lydiana shot him a sharp look, but he simply smiled, eager to see her abilities in action. She called him a weirdo for wanting to test dangerous magic on himself, and she wasn't wrong. Eve collapsed to the ground, desperately pleading with him to reconsider, warning that both spells were potentially deadly. A slight misjudgment could easily result in his heart stopping forever. He told her to get up, but she refused to watch him risk his life on such a perilous experiment. In response, he drew a dagger, believing a bit of persuasion was necessary. He said that, in return, he would demonstrate his own skills. The 2 faced each other, blades in hand, ready for a very different kind of sparring. He ordered her to attack with the intent to kill. Eve hesitated, unsure about the whole situation, but Lydiana gave a nod of reassurance for her to go all out. Her expression hardened with newfound determination, and gripping her small blade tightly, she nodded in agreement. With surprising speed, she lunged forward, her blade aiming for a vital spot. Ray narrowed his eyes, studying her every move. He recognized her form as well-trained, the result of years of practice, but her attack was easily deflected. He pointed out a flaw in her footwork, urging her to try again. Quickly, he disarmed and neutralized her. The lesson ended with her pinned to the ground, Ray standing over her after assessing her abilities. He admitted she had potential but was still too predictable. He concluded that combat in this world was unrefined, with fighters relying more on brute strength than strategy. Deciding to teach them both, he began with the basics of fire magic. Lydiana was less than thrilled, unimpressed by yet another science lesson. Ray instructed Eve to summon a small flame, explaining the principles of combustion, which left both students utterly bewildered. As the day closed, the fire died down, and Ray reflected on his two very different pupils. Eve approached the analytical, strategic side, while Lydiana relied solely on instinct. He planned their training schedule for the coming days. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Eve hesitated about letting Ray take the first watch. Lydiana reassured her, explaining that rest itself was part of training. She told Eve that Ray's chantless magic was unprecedented, and Eve could only think it was a gift from the goddess. Lydiana added that Ray had only studied magic for a few months, sharing what he had told her. She revealed he was an otherworlder reincarnated from a realm without magic. This information overwhelmed Eve, who felt unworthy of teaching someone so extraordinary. She jumped up, insisting she would take the first watch herself. Lydiana had to physically stop her, annoyed at the effort wasted. Ray found the entire situation somewhat overwhelming. The next dawn brought a new lesson in assassination, which proved more emotionally taxing for Eve than she had expected. Ray decided that enough practice for one day was enough, and their first trip back to town would include a visit to a clothing shop for Eve. Approaching the city, Ray sensed danger ahead. Confirming he was right, he saw 6 men stationed just outside the walls. It was Sven and Roy, the A-rank adventurers, and their expressions showed their displeasure. Roy had been tracking their targets for 3 days and knew they would need to return to town for the train. Sven's irritation was palpable after his earlier humiliation. From the shadows, Ray and Lydiana overheard their sinister plans. Eliminate Roy, capture the women, and study Lydiana's unique magic. While Roy and the others cared mainly about their destructive ambitions, Roy casually agreed to their wicked proposal. He believed crushing their spirits would make them easier to control. An argument broke out over who would go first. Such behavior was characteristic of real A-rank adventurers. Though Roy questioned their S-rank status, Sven dismissed the doubt, claiming their recent luck at stopping a stampede and a lightning strike proved their worth. He revealed a powerful artifact supposedly capable of sealing magic altogether, recognized by their companions as a forbidden item. Sven boasted that as a noble heir, such things were easily acquired. Suddenly, a disembodied voice interrupted. A mysterious figure appeared confidently, and Sven's hand flailed in search of his precious artifact, only to find it vanish. Frantically, he searched for the missing object. From the trees, Ray subtly signaled Eve, whose face hardened with resolve. She summoned darkness and cast a potent sleep spell on the entire group. The A-rank adventurers were caught completely off guard as their eyes rolled back and they collapsed one after another onto the forest floor. Lydiana identified the fallen men, Sven, Roy, and their band, the Blue Blood. Ray scoffed at their overly grandiose name. Lydiana noted their carelessness, questioning their claimed A-rank status. Eve explained she knew their history from her time with the guild. Sven's party had a long record of corruption, using wealth and influence to hide their misdeeds, while Roy was known for conducting highly unethical magical experiments. Lydiana wondered why the guild had sent them. Perhaps it was a setup. Sven's eye twitched even while unconscious. Rei explained that this was a classic move, sending problematic operatives on a suicide mission. Realizing that killing them now would play into someone else's hands, Lydiana asked when the spell would wear off. Eve didn't know, and Rei understood that the duration was uncertain, but they wouldn't wake soon. Without hesitation, Rei drew his dagger, moving toward the incapacitated men. The girls watched in shock as he began healing only their superficial injuries, then explained his true intent, to disable them permanently. Though harsh, Lydiana admitted it was better than the alternative. Eve was utterly astounded by his mastery of healing magic, marveling at his innovative approach. Once their immediate danger was dismissed, they made their way back to the city. Their first stop was a local outfitter, where Rei patiently waited outside while the girls selected new gear. They returned moments later dressed in matching outfits, prompting Rei to look slightly surprised. Eve explained she simply wanted to coordinate with the rest of the party. Rei told her it suited her well, and Lydiana suggested formalizing their group, though Eve hesitated, feeling unworthy of joining an S-rank team. Rei reassured her that given her low rank, this was her best chance to travel freely. Moved by his words, she agreed with gratitude shining in her eyes, and they headed to the Adventurers Guild. The receptionist, clearly envious, displayed a fangirl enthusiasm, a typical reaction. With their city errands completed, they went to the magic train station. The train to the Dwarven Kingdom of Mjid was about to depart, and Rei's demeanor was resolute, ready for the next leg of their journey. The newly formed party prepared to leave, with Rei mentioning that their 3-day trip was ideal for more magic lessons. Lydiana's face showed pure horror at the idea, though she knew resistance was futile. In just 3 days they would finally reach the dwarves and move closer to their ultimate goals. Meanwhile, in the Oblin Kingdom, a student peeked anxiously into a room. Yuko, the Bow Saint, called out her friend's name with alarm. She quickly grabbed another student, demanding to know what was wrong. Her concern was for Hibiki, the Sword Saint, whose eyes had been badly injured in the fight. The other heroes could only watch in shock and worry. Yuko's fury erupted, vowing she would never forgive the attacker. Her rage exploded, knocking over a bookshelf, her emotions uncontrollable. One of the heroes tried to shift the focus, but Yuko snapped back, screaming that their comrade was dead. Her outburst stunned everyone. She then hurried to Hibiki's bedside, collapsing beside her in grief. She apologized, blaming herself for not being there sooner. Takashiro, their leader, wondered who could have inflicted such wounds. Hibiki, lying exhausted, uttered one chilling word: reincarnator. She suspected their opponent was from their world, probably Japanese, and recalled a fighting style from an ancient school. Yuko recognized a key term from Hibiki's family library, a form of self-hypnosis soldiers used to conquer the fear of death. One hero joked that perhaps a samurai had been reincarnated, but Yuko's face turned cold, promising to kill whoever was responsible. Hibiki reflected on the fight, recalling techniques she had never seen before. She wondered if her school of swordsmanship possessed such moves. Yuko asked whether it could be a lost technique from her family's lineage. Hibiki speculated that her great-grandfather might have known it. She remembered a secluded dojo in the mountains, where her great-grandfather sparred with a young disciple. A memory surfaced of a young girl running toward that very place, witnessing a brutal training scene. Inside the dojo, her great-grandfather challenged a student, pushing him towards true mastery, yet denying him at the last moment with a knowing smile. The match ended swiftly, leaving the young disciple defeated, a scene etched into her memory. As a child, Hibiki had fled that brutal environment, fleeing into the forest in terror. Now, this memory haunted her, revealing a secret deadly art hidden within her family. Yuko listened, disbelief in her eyes, but Hibiki confirmed that her family's style concealed a dangerous technique. Takashiro realized their enemy was a master of this secret art. Hibiki admitted her arrogance in believing she was invincible and silently apologized to her great-grandfather for not using her holy sword. Yuko left the room, her mind racing with thoughts. She looked back at her friend, heart heavy, vowing to share her pain. She reflected on their recent gains in this new world, having slain many but never expecting to be hunted herself. Yet, what troubled her most was the look in Rei's eyes during the fight. His terrifying resolve, indicating he had already accepted death. This realization overwhelmed her with fear. She wished she had finished him then. Takashiro promised next time he would be more careful and vowed revenge for their wounded comrade. The others could only watch with concern. Back aboard the train, Rei asked Lydiana about her unease. She confessed that something felt off for some time but tried to hide her worries with a smile when asked if their destination was the cause. Her expression betrayed her, and she admitted their journey's true purpose had been to procure a weapon for him. Rei looked at her with understanding, sensing her inner turmoil. She questioned whether their shared path would end once they arrived. He acknowledged the journey was perilous and admitted he had been a burden, but also revealed that he owed his life to her. Her eyes filled with emotion as she saw him in a new light. She expressed her feelings softly, questioning if their partnership would continue beyond this point. A single tear trailed down her cheek, and beneath the starlight, their bond deepened. She called out his name, her voice trembling with emotion, marking the beginning of something more profound. Tears streamed freely as they clung tightly to one another, sharing a moment of rare serenity amid their arduous journey. That night, as shadows deepened, Lydiana lay awake in her chamber. Hearing Eve stir, she softly called out, apologizing for the disturbance, knowing her companion had listened to everything. Glancing at their new ally, she saw a mirror of her own spirit and gently brushed the sleeping girl's hair, whispering that she was no longer alone. When they reached the address Lydiana had given, she confirmed it was the city's premier blacksmith's shop. However, their reception was far from welcoming. The blacksmith, named Ganma, practically slammed the door in their faces, exemplifying poor customer service. Lydiana admitted the craftsman could be difficult, and she called him by name. Recognition lit up his face immediately. He was overjoyed to see her, confessing he had feared she was dead. He asked if she wanted repairs on her rapier, but she explained she also intended to commission new weapons, an idea the old dwarf clearly disapproved of. He scoffed at the thought of forging a blade for an amateur. Lydiana insisted that no ordinary human could harm her sword, and Rei was the one teaching her to fight. She claimed Rei was far stronger than she was, pointing to the damage on the hero's sword from their recent battle with the heroes. Genma was stunned by the peculiar destruction. Rei finally inquired if he knew of a katana, a name associated with a legendary hero of past ages. Rei declared he could wield such a blade, prompting a challenge from Genma, his eyes flashing with curiosity and a broad grin spreading across his face. He retrieved an ancient katana he had forged many years before and tossed it to Rei. The young man assumed a familiar, deadly stance, impressing the old craftsman. Yet Rei found the weapon too light and stiff for his style, something that baffled Ganma, who explained his technique demanded a blade with perfect balance, weight, and flexibility, qualities from his homeland. Curious about his mysterious strength, Genma requested to see more of their skills, including Eve's. A sparring match ensued with Lydiana and Rei demonstrating their prowess while the blacksmith and Eve watched intently. Then it was Eve's turn to face Genma. After observing enough, the blacksmith agreed to accept their commission, making an exception in their favor. Though relieved, Rei remarked that the first katana felt unsettlingly light, a bold critique considering they had just secured the forging deal. Gunma barked an order for his apprentice to bring the second blade, a more impressive piece resembling a legendary hero's sword from 2 centuries past. When Rei held it, a smile dawned on his face. It was perfect. The blacksmith told him he could borrow it for the time being. With their business concluded, they prepared to depart. Genma sat down with a drink, contemplating his unusual clients. He reflected on Rei's trained form and commanding presence, recognizing the flaws he had uncovered in a sword no one else could wield. He also noted Lydiana's remarkable growth under Rei's guidance, realizing their skill was no joke. Just then, another customer arrived, the cloaked woman waiting for her order. Genma estimated it would take another 2 days to finish, and she accepted, promising to return for it. She and her companions then left the workshop. The woman, named Yoshio, confirmed her patience for the sword. Her friends, Jessica and K2, were eager to leave the city, with Rina joking about their classmates still being stuck in school uniforms. Later, the trio sat in a tavern enjoying a meal they now appreciated, having once lacked such luxuries. Their peace was shattered by an unruly local who insulted their presence, claiming they didn't belong there. The heroes weren't pleased. While his friend tried to quiet him, the drunkard refused to back down, and Jessica, tired of the disturbance, confronted him. Her response was swift. She delivered a powerful strike that sent the man flying and ended the quarrel before it truly started. Rina followed swiftly, neutralizing his companions with deadly precision. When one of the thugs tried to escape, K2 cast an ice spell, trapping him in a solid prison of frost. Impressed by their new ally's power, Jessica and Rina celebrated their victory, grateful for the excitement this world offered. Suddenly, noise in the streets drew their attention. A procession of heavily armed dwarves announced the return of the legendary magic battle-axe Corps. Intrigued, the three heroes decided to follow the crowd, eager to discover what lay ahead. From a balcony overlooking the bustling street, Ray and his companions observed the parade below. Lydiana explained that they were witnessing MG's elite monster-slaughtering unit in action, so formidable that the local adventurers guild had all but become irrelevant. Suddenly, a new voice broke through their focus. The mage K2 approached their table with a cheerful wave, having spotted them from across the street. He made a somewhat awkward attempt at flirting with Lydiana, which she plainly ignored. Ray's gaze sharpened instantly. He recognized him immediately, an established hero from Japan. Realizing that this must be the exploration team they'd been seeking, the heroes watched as K2 dismissed her cold shoulder and boldly declared himself a hero. The word instantly heightened Lydiana's nerves. Meanwhile, Eve observed the tense situation, her eyes flickering with nervous anticipation. K2 then suggested that they all should get along, reaching out to touch Lydiana's shoulder, a mistake that was quickly halted by a flash of steel. Ray, without hesitation, pressed a knife into K2's hand, pinning it to the table as his companions stared in disbelief. K2 yelped in shock and pain, but Ray's icy stare left no doubt. He meant business. He warned him, coldly, not to lay a finger on his woman. At that moment, city guards arrived, blocking their table and scoffing at their supposed S-rank status. They ordered the group to wait quietly in a cell for their judgment. Frustration simmered within Eve, who refused to accept the idea of her new friends being detained unjustly. Ray, meanwhile, felt his face flush with embarrassment at his outburst. Calling her my woman was entirely out of character. Lydiana, however, seemed to relish the display, leaning against him and asking to stay like this for a while longer. Elsewhere inside the city, the exploring heroes regrouped. K2 clasped his hand, still shaken by the pain. Jessica pointed out that their opponent was genuinely dangerous, while Rina informed K2 that reattaching his severed hand was impossible. The guard commander scolded Ray for causing chaos, but K2's hand trembled with rage, vowing to make him pay. Yet, the captain of the guards dismissed the threat, criticizing his subordinates for challenging S-rank adventurers. As quickly as it started, the party was released, and Ray shot a smug wave at the guards on his way out. Later, they strolled through the city streets. Ray recognized that their current equipment wouldn't suffice against more heroes. Lydiana proposed seeking help from Genma, the blacksmith they knew. The workshop owner was annoyed by their early morning visit, but upon hearing about the urgent threat, heroes wandering the city, his expression grew serious. She revealed that their enemies had already infiltrated the city, prompting Genma's grip on his mug to tighten. He demanded details about their foes. Ray explained that these enemies were the so-called heroes, and revealed that he had already defeated 4 of them. He assured them this new band was nothing like the legendary heroes of myth. Lydiana shared that they had taken her sister's life and nearly ended hers, a fate they couldn't allow to spread further. The old blacksmith listened intently, then led them to a trapdoor beneath his workshop, revealing a secret armory. Inside, his finest weapons awaited. Curious, the girls eagerly examined the arsenal. Eve found a dagger imbued with fire, while Lydiana selected a new blade of her own. Genma asked if Rei needed anything, but he was content with his own solitary weapon. The blacksmith then inquired whether Rei had ever seen a hero's sacred sword. Rei recalled his battle with a sword saint, unimpressed by her weapon. Victory, he believed, came from the resolve to face death head-on. He admitted he had narrowly escaped with only a severed arm, a fact that left Genma speechless, until Rei revealed he had reattached it himself. This only deepened the blacksmith's curiosity about him. Later, Genma pulled Rei aside into a smaller room. Behind a hidden panel, he revealed a single ornate box. When he opened it, Rei's eyes widened at the sight inside. The demon blade MG had forged centuries ago from a black dragon's core and the rare oraculum. The sword had been dormant for ages, a relic of immense power. Genma asked if Rei could tell its story just by looking. Known as a cursed sword, it had a notorious reputation for driving wielders mad or worse. Genma then casually inquired whether Rei wanted to try wielding it. Just a joke, perhaps, but one that suggested he might be different. Without hesitation, Rei drew the legendary katana, feeling its weight and balance. His reflection shimmered in the blade's deadly surface. He noted that the sword's ominous aura had vanished and told it not to get too attached. Genma was visibly surprised, asking if Rei sensed anything at all. Rei replied that the fit was perfect, the length, the weight. He requested to borrow the sword, and Genma, impressed, nodded without hesitation. The blacksmith then asked a pointed question. Was Rei from another world? Rei's silence served as confirmation. Realizing everything, Genma asked if he was also a hero. Rei denied it, describing himself as a mere otherworlder pursuing his own goals. Genma asked him to keep that quiet, a request Rei accepted without objection. As the pieces fell into place, Genma produced one last item, an old relic from Rei's world. Inside a box was an M1 Team 11 pistol, a legendary firearm brought here 200 years ago by another hero. Rei stared, awestruck, knowing he held in his hands a piece of his own past, the very weapon that had once defined his most critical moments. Genma confesses that they are still struggling to replicate the ammunition, while re-examines the weapon and quickly realizes the timelines don't align. He deduces it must have been stored in a stasis box, perfectly preserved across ages. Genma, seeking his expert opinion on their cloning dilemma, watches intently. Rei describes the gun as a marvel of modern craftsmanship, comparing its complexity to jumping from an axe to a magic sword. Holding the weapon, he recognizes its intricate design firsthand and begins to formulate a plan. Curious, Genma asks what he's thinking. Rei boldly requests the weapon for himself, a daring ask that makes the old dwarf's expression unreadable. He declines, explaining it's their only sample, and the ammunition remains under development. Rei isn't surprised and responds with quiet acceptance. Genma chuckles, remarking that he can have the gun only after his death. Meanwhile, the young women return, excited about their new weapons, and the party expresses gratitude to the blacksmith for his aid. With a final wave, Genma wishes them well. 2 days later, Rina, the cloaked hero, revisits the workshop. Genma presents her with her new sword, inviting her to test it. As she channels her mana, a surge of dark energy emanates from the blade, impressing the blacksmith, who asks if it's her first enchanted sword. Rina offers a playful smile, calling it a masterpiece, albeit overpriced. Genma's face tightens, haggling wasn't part of the plan. His apprentices crowd around, demanding payment, but Rina remains unfazed, raising her new blade with a dark grin. Suddenly, one of the apprentices is swallowed by a shadowy aura. She declares the weapon is perfect for someone like her, and her companions appear equally intimidating. Genma's eyes widen in horror as he recognizes whom they are. A sudden cry of fire erupts inside the workshop, and flames quickly consume everything. From a distance, Rei and his party observe the chaos and smoke. Rei lifts his hand to signal his companions to hold back and unleashes a powerful torrent of water, dousing the flames instantly. The group surveys the charred remains, Eve visibly shaken but unharmed, concern etched on her face for their fallen master. Rei's gaze grows cold as he notices the injuries, wounds consistent with a rapier. An apprentice surviving amid the wreckage, trembling, looks at them. He asks Ri if he was one of Genma's pupils, recognizing him from the blacksmith's fallen colleagues. The apprentice recounts a scene. A cloaked woman complained about the price, and they tried to teach her a lesson, an idea that backfired badly. She swiftly defeated his brothers, and her companions overwhelmed Genma. Describing her and her allies as 3 humans and 2 with black hair, Rei narrows his eyes. These are no ordinary foes but heroes. His mind flashes to the box Genma showed him, a sacred inheritance. He steps from the wreckage, intent clear. He tells the apprentice to tend to the aftermath and picks up the blacksmith's gun, a grim token of vengeance. Swearing to honor his fallen friend, he sets his mind on justice. Meanwhile, the group spots their targets from a nearby rooftop. The heroes glance back, uncertain of what's to come. K2's face twists with rage, vowing to kill them all. Rina warns him against such foolishness, urging them to follow and strike where they can strike unseen. The party begins to trail the fleeing enemies, crossing the city gates with the heroes in pursuit. Using a tracking orb, Rina notes their targets are moving swiftly. Jessica smirks, eager for the chase to begin. As they press on, a volley of throwing knives whizzes past, forcing the pursuers to quicken their pace. Rei senses danger and yells for Lydiana and Eve to retreat. A massive explosion of ice erupts beneath their feet, encasing trees in solid frost that shatters from the blast. K2, the mage, has caught up. Rei and Lydiana leap back, avoiding the icy assault. He marvels at the spell's incredible range and quickly raises a barrier to block the attack. Meanwhile, the other 2 heroes appear, and Rina's smile reflects her delight at their speed. Both Rei and Lydiana find themselves impressed. Rina's rapid closing of distance is startling. She seems to thrive in the cold, her weapon, a rapier, glinting menacingly. The words of Genma's murdered apprentice flicker in Lydiana's mind, and she recognizes the weapon. Rina admits mockingly that Genma put up a good fight. She calls him a suitable opponent to test her new blade. Fury boils over within Lydiana as she declares that woman is hers to fight. Rei and Eve watch helplessly as her rage consumes her. Suddenly, Jessica, the 3rd hero, steps forward, claiming Eve, the blue-haired girl, as her opponent. Eve's expression hardens. She's ready for the confrontation. Rei calls her name, but she's already moving with her focus on the fight. Meanwhile, K2 finally faces his target, seizing the opportunity to settle old scores by summoning a giant icy pillar. Rei swiftly dodges, and K2 retaliates by conjuring a pack of ice wolves. Rei's new sword slices through them effortlessly, but K2 smirks, confident that Rei can't escape his trap. He releases a cloud of razor-sharp ice shards, the cold now biting into Rei's skin as he fights to keep his footing. He sensed the air growing colder than ever before, an unnatural chill signaling a prelude to a formidable assault. K2 began to chant with intense power, commanding the world to freeze as he unleashed his ultimate spell. Absolute Zero. The sky seemed to stiffen, and a deadly blast of ice and stillness erupted. To everyone's amazement, Rei was caught in the icy explosion, seemingly frozen solid. Yet, as the shards of ice shattered, no sign of him remained behind. Lydiana watched the aftermath with bated breath, a lump forming in her throat as she called out his name, her focus shattered by worry. Rina chuckled mockingly, questioning whether she was already looking away or if her concern was genuine. She hinted that she didn't want to injure her too badly, since a dead hero was hardly valuable. Displaying her bravado, Rina taunted her opponent about her heroics, showing no remorse. Anger ignited within Lydiana, and she summoned the wind with fury, casting an acceleration spell to close the distance instantly. Rina, however, parried effortlessly, ridiculing her for her lack of speed. Determined, Lydiana gritted her teeth, pushing herself beyond her limits. Yet Rena moved as if unaffected. Her smirk only deepened, dismissing her opponent's efforts as futile. A clean strike finally found its mark, knocking Lydiana's sword from her hand and leaving her vulnerable. Despite this, she remembered Ray, trusting him to give her strength. Her eyes snapped open with an unshakable resolve. Her focus sharpened, and her fear vanished. Rena observed her with amusement, intrigued by this sudden change. Lydiana demanded more from herself, summoning an even greater speed. Something inside her fragmented, unlocking a new level of power. Calling upon lightning spirits, she was engulfed in a storm of raw energy. Her eyes shone with the fury of the storm itself as she unleashed her newly honed technique. Wind-lightning acceleration. Rena's face changed from confident to stunned, realizing her opponent had become an entirely different threat. The warriors clashed at blistering speeds, matching each other's frantic pace. Rena finally understood this was no longer a mere contest. This was a fight to the death. Lydiana launched a relentless flurry of strikes, creating an after-image that Rena couldn't follow. A precise blow struck the hero's back, causing her grip on her rapier to falter. Rena spun around in disbelief. Her perfect record was now tarnished. Lydiana stood firm, her new powers exacting a toll that caused her to bleed from her eyes. Rena stumbled back, questioning whether she was willing to die in this fight. She scoffed at the idea, dismissing it as absurd. Yet Lydiana had made her point. Summoning her energy, she began casting a teleportation spell, vanishing in a flash of light, leaving her wounded adversary behind. Rena could only watch in shock as her opponent disappeared into thin air. Meanwhile, Eve endured her own grueling battle, completely overwhelmed by the relentless Jessica. The hero taunted her, daring her to fight back, her hooliganish grin unchanging. Eve pushed herself to the brink, enduring another painful blow. Jessica mocked her weak defense, urging her to stay alert. The brutal assault continued, with Eve's eyes narrowing as she invoked darkness, the power of shadows to paralyze her attacker momentarily. Yet, Jessica revealed her gauntlet's concealed anti-magic properties, rendering the spell useless. Realizing her trump card was nullified, Eve saw no chance to turn the tide at close range. Jessica advanced to finish her, but Eve seized her opportunity. Using a technique taught by Ray, she launched a swift, flowing water dance, an unexpected counterattack. Jessica was caught off guard. Ray's voice echoed in her mind, imparting a lesson. Closing the distance and observing your opponent's patterns are key when facing a superior enemy. Eve targeted vital points, first striking a nerve behind the elbow, then a crippling blow to the inner thigh, and finally a devastating shot to the liver. Jessica grimaced through the searing pain, now clearly off balance. Eve pressed her advantage, forcing Jessica's blood to flow copiously from internal injuries. The hero coughed blood and collapsed, defeated at last. Not wasting time, Eve pulled out a small vial, her last resort. Jessica, however, quickly downed a potent healing potion, cursing her lost advantage as she spat out the empty vial. The fury in her eyes was unmistakable. She was furious about wasting such an expensive item. Eve's gaze turned cold, her magic eye of flame blazing to life. A torrent of black fire surged toward the injured Jessica, the flames engulfing her in an endless inferno. Ray's voice echoed one final lesson. This was the end. As the fierce flames consumed her, Eve watched quietly, her mission complete. K2 stared in disbelief as his ally fell. He called out to Rena, only to see her clutching her wounded arm in fury, desperately demanding the elixir. He urged her to use it, but she snapped that she didn't have one. A heated argument erupted between them, each blaming the other for their failure. K2 reflected on the ice prison he had created, realizing it was more than a simple illusion, an actual trap. Just then, an unexpected voice spoke from behind him. Ray was standing there, completely unharmed. The effects of the Absolute Zero spell, obvious to him, had not affected him at all. Rena, meanwhile, was suddenly struck down from behind by an unseen attack. K2 watched helplessly as Lydiana emerged over her fallen form, tears of exhaustion and pain streaming down her face. Rei's expression remained unreadable as he regarded the scene. K2 looked on in shock, puzzled over how Rei had survived the extreme cold. The answer became clear. Rei had used some form of teleportation, vanishing before the spell could truly take effect. Rei's gaze fixated on Rina's fallen form, a stark reminder that his confidence had crumbled. With icy calmness, he addressed K2, assuring him he would answer all his questions later. Before that, he had a message for the fallen hero. A cold command for Rina to apologize to Genma in the afterlife. Rina's smug expression vanished instantly when a gun was pressed against her forehead. Without warning, a deafening shot tore through the forest, leaving K2 frozen with horror. Turning away, his face drained of color, he watched helplessly as Rei moved swiftly, delivering a disabling strike and pinning Rina's form beneath him with ease. Raising the stolen magic sealing artifact, Rei mocked her reliance on such a convenient tool, asserting that without magic, she was merely a frightened girl. Meanwhile, Jessica's body lay sprawled on the ground. Though seemingly lifeless, her breathing was faint, her life slipping away. In her mind, she desperately pleaded not to die, recalling a hidden, terrifying power she had never revealed. Her hand twitched unnaturally, and dark, monstrous energy surged around her. Her form began to morph, growing into a colossal, beast-like creature. Perhaps not her final form. Eve, sensing the sudden escalation, called out Rei's name, alarmed by the monstrous transformation. Rei turned abruptly, stunned to see the creature looming before them. Both stared in disbelief as the beast roared defiantly. K2, overwhelmed, watched helplessly as the creature smashed its fist into the ground, forcing Rei and Eve to leap back. Rei carried Lydiana in his arms, the shadow of the monster casting a pall over them. Jessica, now in her monstrous form, let out a furious roar. Recognizing that the situation had turned from bad to catastrophic, Rei used his flight magic to pull Lydiana to safety on a nearby cliff. From his vantage point, he was stunned by the creature's destructive power. Eve, from below, confirmed she was unharmed, and Rei instructed her to keep watch over Lydiana while he confronted the beast. He leapt down with unwavering resolve, prepared to face this new threat. His mind raced through Eve's report. Jessica should have been fatally wounded. He had to end this now and knew exactly which spell to cast. Summoning all his power, Rei summoned a colossal bolt of lightning from above. The bolt struck the beast's back, creating a cloud of smoke and steam, yet the creature remained standing. To Rei's astonishment, its wounds rapidly closed, an incredible regenerative ability. It was healing impossibly fast, rewriting what seemed mortal. The beast roared again. Its wounds vanished entirely. Rei understood it was preparing another devastating attack. Frustration boiled within him as he watched the creature's resilience. Meanwhile, K2 hid behind a tree, paralyzed with terror. Recognizing the monster's gaze locked onto him, he made a desperate run. But the beast swatted him aside effortlessly, sending him flying with a scream of terror. Its focus returned to Rei, who shouted to Eve that she should escape now, urging her to retreat while the monster was preoccupied. The beast tore through the forest, leaving destruction in its path. From the city walls, a dwarven commander spotted the new menace, giving an order to fire upon it. Cannons roared, firing a volley of shells that enveloped the creature in thick smoke. Yet it seemed unfazed. The commander cursed bitterly, knowing it was only a matter of time before the beast reached the city. Suddenly, a messenger arrived with an order from the Magic Battle Axe Corps. Confused, the commander watched as the elite dwarven unit prepared to engage the beast directly. They unleashed a binding spell targeting its legs, but the magic had no effect, merely a perfect hit with no damage. The beast responded with a swipe that sent one of the dwarves flying, filling the soldiers with horror. Their leader urged them to hold the line, but the creature's next strike was lethal. Its giant fist slammed down, and one soldier realized their chances of victory were slim. The commander scolded them for cowardice, questioning their pride. The beast loomed over one remaining dwarf, ready to crush him. until a sudden, massive blast erupted from the city walls, shaking the ground and filling the air with chaos. The inhabitants panicked as the creature dominated the battlefield, a true force of nature. Ray and Eve watched helplessly from a distance as everything unfolded. Inside the capital, the Dwarven Council was stunned by the creature's ferocity. They deployed magic cannons and ordered civilians to evacuate, but one elder, Yuma, remained calm, her expression resembling quiet calculation. Rising abruptly, she declared her intention to meet a guest. Accompanied by her attendant, she moved through a concealed passage to a strongly fortified door deep within the city. She greeted the person on the other side with familiarity, revealing herself as Yuma. On the threshold, she carried an exhausted, wounded Lydiana, who weakly begged for help. Ray, nearby, instructed her not to push herself, promising to take care of her. He explains that he's heard she's renowned as the city's finest defender and insists on her cooperation. His urgent task is to take action against the enormous ape wreaking havoc in the streets. The old woman's eyes sharpen as she assesses him carefully. Ray describes the monster's extraordinary regenerative ability and admits that his magic or spells alone have proven insufficient. He gestures toward his companions, indicating they are too exhausted to continue fighting. He needs time to recover his mana and to secure their safety. Yuma probes whether he truly has a plan to defeat the beast. Ray affirms he does, but only if he can cast a specific, powerful spell. The old woman seems to weigh his desperate plea, recalling the legendary demon blade Gunma entrusted to him. She then reveals an ornate key suggesting a trade, an exchange for her aid. Her attendant appears taken aback, but Yuma insists every possible tool must be considered. The attendant then reveals a large, intricately decorated chest. Yuma unlocks it with the key she provided, revealing its contents to Ray's astonishment. Inside lies a dark robe and a staff, both forged from the same black dragon that formed his new blade. Eve's expression turns to one of dawning horror as she recognizes these artifacts. She urgently tries to stop him, warning that such legendary objects are perilous beyond measure. The robe can convert life force into mana, while the staff amplifies mental powers, a true enhancement. However, she cautions that using either even once could result in death or madness. Unfazed, Ray listens intently, his determination stark. Yuma observes his resolve, realizing she must have appraised his strength. She confirms Eve's warning. The entire nation relies on him. She questions whether his plan justifies risking everything. His attendant, recognizing the gravity, states they have no alternative. If others join the monster, all is lost. Ray admits this isn't purely for his country but driven by personal motives. Yuma accepts his honesty, trusting that more than that, his motives seem genuine. She introduces herself as a leader of the organization JID, and in a formal tone, requests him to wield their secret weapons to save the kingdom. Eve watches helplessly, tears in her eyes. Ray simply smiles, reassuring her not to worry. He puts on the robe and takes up the staff, now fully prepared to face the creature outside. He promises to heal Lydiana's wounds when he returns and asks Yuma to look after his companion in his absence. The old woman questions whether he considers himself a true hero, but he only replies that he has one more favor to ask. Meanwhile, the monstrous form of Jessica looms over the city walls. Dwarven soldiers ready their magic cannons for another assault. The commander shouts the order to fire as the cannons unleash a barrage, striking the beast directly. The soldiers cheer, believing they are finally doing damage. The commander quickly orders reloading for the next shot, but the creature roars unbothered. With a single devastating blow, it shatters the city's defenses. From a safe distance, the party observes the chaos. The Dwarven Council stares in disbelief. Ray explains that a sniper's effectiveness ends once the enemy's position is exposed. As Ray steps out of the tunnel, a guard questions his identity, but all he does is stand tall, radiating newfound power. The guard's eyes widen at the recognition of the legendary artifacts. Yuma simply smiles, confirming what they see. Ray clarifies he's not fighting for the kingdom's sake. Yuma then appeals to the council, making a final request. Rei intends to kill the monster himself. If he fails and dies, they must promise to protect his companions. The council exchanges uneasy glances but ultimately accepts. The leader asks if that's truly all, and Rei affirms he has no other motives. His straightforwardness earns their trust, and they swear on the 7 houses to honor his request. Rei nods slightly, turning to approach the battlefield. The council watches anxiously. One member asks whether he's truly wielding the cursed legendary artifacts, and Yuma's attendant confirms it, mentioning Eve's futile attempts to stop him. These are artifacts so dangerous that even old heroes dared not take them. Without hesitation, Rei takes up the cursed items. The council knows the stakes. If he fails, their entire realm could fall. They regret entrusting the verdict to an outsider but focus on Rei's plan. Under the pale moonlight, the final confrontation begins to unfold. The dwarven commander rallies his troops on the front line. His orders are clear. Distract the beast while Rei conjures his attack. The soldiers, though hesitant, obey. They unleash a continuous barrage of magic and projectiles, trying to slow the monster's advance. The beast responds with deafening roars, easily swatting away the attacks. It marches forward, seemingly uninjured, until it suddenly halts. Sensing a new, powerful presence gathering above, it roars again. From high above, Rei observes the chaos. The diversion is working perfectly, but his strongest lightning magic proved ineffective. Now he prepares a final, devastating spell, one he calls a nuclear strike magic, inspired by ancient weapons from his past life. His past experience with the destructive principles of a hydrogen bomb informs this dangerous ritual. Previously abandoned due to immense mana costs, he now considers its feasibility, thanks to the cursed artifacts and local resources. He begins assembling an immense sphere of unstable energy, holding in his hand the very power of a miniature sun. This spell, perilous and destructive, is the culmination of his preparations, ready to annihilate the beast entirely. The creature and the dwarves gaze upward, overwhelmed by a mixture of awe and fear. At that moment, the commander notices the signal and urgently commands his soldiers to take their positions.